Hello, everyone, and welcome to Scourge of War Waterloo, episode 16. Now, as you can see by the screen here, we have some new menu art. 2 days ago, Norbsoft and Matrix Games released Scourge of War Waterloo, the Collector's Edition, which is basically a compilation of the main Waterloo game as well as all the expansions, Ligny, Quatre Bras, and Wavre, sort of all in one package. And there was also a small update released along with it, patch 1.02. And there's no gameplay changes in the patch or anything. Basically, it just includes this menu art, some fixes to, I guess, the Italian language version of the game. But the biggest thing that it does include is it comes with the newest expanded toolbar, the Grog toolbar, already loaded with the game. Now, if you recall in episode one, I showed you how to download the Grog toolbar. You know where to go to get it, how to put it in your mods folder, and how to activate it in the modifications tab, and blah blah blah. You can go and review episode one, the introduction to the series, if you would like to see that again. However, a lot of what I showed you in that video is now uh, mute, void, basically, because the new Grog toolbar comes with the game. You no longer need to go and download it and extract it and actually put it into the game yourself. It's already going to be there, whether you buy the collector's edition or already have the standard game and just update to patch 1.02. The Grog toolbar is going to be there now. So most of what I showed you in that video is no longer necessary. All you need to do is go into modifications, check the expanded toolbar box, and then go down and hit use selected mods, and that's it. You've activated the Grog toolbar. And then all you have to remember is to just play the game through the user scenarios tab. The Grog toolbar doesn't work with the Waterloo if you play through the Waterloo battles tab, because um, some of the functions of the toolbar just don't work in if you play through the Waterloo battles tab, and it also has a tendency to make the game crash. So uh, the newest version of the Grog toolbar has all the stock scenarios from Waterloo, Quatre Bras, Ligny, and Wavre placed in the user scenarios tab. So they're all there and they all play exactly the same. It's just that the Grog toolbar is made to function through the user scenario tab. Um, so it's real easy now to use the Grog toolbar. It comes with the game. All you have to do is go into modifications, check it, hit use selected mods, and then just remember to play your scenarios through the user scenarios tab, which I've always done in every series or in every video in the series so far. So, you should be able to figure out how to do that. It's not hard at all. So things just got a lot easier as far as using the Grog toolbar. Um, which brings me to my next point. Since I started doing this video series and wanted to gear it towards newer players, um, it dawned on me that I've never really actually gone over the Grog toolbar and all its functions. Um, I've kind of just explained the buttons we're using, for a given scenario, but I've never actually stopped and explained, everything you can do with the Grog toolbar. Um, and I'm not really sure it's necessary, because by the end of this series, we will have used, every function of the Grog toolbar. But I was thinking about maybe doing a series, a four-part series I was going to call the Grog Toolbar Demystified, or something like that, where basically in each part of in each video of the series, I would um, cover all the functions of the Grog toolbar for a given arm. So, you know, episode one would be infantry, episode two would be artillery, then cavalry, and then using the various levels of leaders and the Grog toolbar. Um, and it's something I've been kicking around in my head of maybe doing, but it would yet again be another sidetrack from um, the main uh, the main part of the series, which is covering all the best ways to beat the scenario. So once again, I would have to interrupt that in order to film what would be a four-part series, and I'm not sure it's necessary, because as we go through the series, we're just gonna cover those kinds of things as the series goes on. So really, what I thought I'd do here is just pose the question to viewers. My small viewer base that I have so far. What do you guys think? Is that something? Is that something you guys feel you need? Do you need to have the Grog toolbar basically explained to you, um, and show you every aspect of what it can do? Um, I've shown you a lot of it already, but there's nothing. I haven't done anything where I just focus on the interface itself. Um, and I'm not sure, how complicated the interface really is uh, to a newer player, because, like I said in episode one, I haven't been a newer player in so long, and the Grog toolbar and the interface is just, second nature to me. I don't even think about it. But it has been something I've been thinking about doing. So I guess let me know in the viewer comments if you would like me to do that, to do a series on, the Grog toolbar and, how it relates to, every arm in the game: infantry, artillery, cavalry, and leaders. And if that's something you think it would be worth interrupting the series yet again, to do. Um, but right now, we're just going to continue with the series as it is, and we'll see what kind of feedback I get on the idea of doing that, because it probably wouldn't take me long to do if I buckle down and do it, but I didn't think the redoing the Brigade series would take me that long, and it took me about a week and a half to do. I thought I could do it in a whole weekend. So, but yeah, just if you guys think that's something worth doing, let me know in the comments, and we'll see what happens. So let's get into this here, and today we are going to be covering the second video in our little trilogy of videos concerning the fighting around Plancenoit village. Um, in the last episode, we played the Prussian scenario, forward 16th Brigade, where we drove the remnants of the 6th Corps out of Plancenoit and captured part of it and got a foothold in it. And in this scenario, we're going to play the Imperial Guard uh, on the French side, and we're going to attempt to recapture uh, the village of Plancenoit, as this was pretty much the last kind of defensive position on the French right flank, and they really, really couldn't afford to let it fall. So Napoleon sent in initially elements of the Young Guard to take back the village from the Prussians. Now, a word about the Young Guard. The Imperial Guard, I think, was broken up into uh, basically three levels. At the top, the very most elite troops were the Old Guard. Um, these were troops that had served with Napoleon for many previous campaigns. They were the best troops in the army by far. They were his, elite, the crack troops of his army. And then below that, there was the middle guard. And I think in order to be part of the middle guard, I think you had to serve, had to have served in like two or three previous campaigns. And at the very bottom of the Imperial Guard were the Young Guard, which is the troops we're going to be playing in this scenario. And I think to be in the Young Guard, you had to have served in at least one previous campaign. So the troops in the Young Guard, as far as troop quality goes, they're not that much different than the normal line troops that you play in most of these scenarios. They're certainly nowhere near the supermen that the Old Guard are. They're level 5 seasoned, level 6 regular. Solid troops. By no means garbage. Definitely solid troops. But they aren't from the planet Krypton like the Old Guard are. So, all right, let's get this going. And it starts at 6:30 p.m. basically right after the last episode where we captured Plancenoit, and it says the situation is a corps of the Prussian army has emerged from the Bois de Paris and driven the 6th Corps back. Recent attacks are pushing the 19th Division troops out of Plancenoit. Drive the Prussians back out of the village of Plancenoit and secure the right flank of the French army. So as we see, as I start scrolling down here, we have two brigades, Guy and Chartrand, as well as a whole bunch of artillery, more artillery than we really need or can place effectively in this scenario. But nevertheless, we have it. And we basically start to the west of Plancenoit here. And as you see, we need 2,000 points for a major victory. Now, if you recall in the last scenario, I said that it was one of the few scenarios where you could actually achieve a major victory without capturing the objective. And you only needed 1,000 points for a major victory. In this scenario, we need 2,000 points for a major victory, and there is no way you're going to get it without capturing the objective. Which leads me to a little disclaimer here. I've always believed in being honest with you guys. It took me 2 attempts at playing the scenario. I recorded them twice, basically. It took me 2 attempts to get a major victory. The first time I played it, I was literally short by like 3 points to gain a major victory. I was literally at like 1,990 points when the timer ran out. It's only a 30-minute scenario, so you really have to get a move on. But that's not the reason I didn't quite make it. This is one of those capture the fort scenarios. It's the same objective. It's the church at Plancenoit. But whereas in the last scenario, it was not critical to capture it. In this scenario, it really is critical to capture it. And you have to capture it relatively quickly, like, within, 15 minutes, 20 minutes the latest. It's worth 100 points a minute. So bare minimum, you have to be in that church and getting points from it. Uh, you know, within 20 minutes into the scenario. And the problem with capture the fort scenarios is there's no way to force the issue. Um, no matter how much manpower you bring to bear, and I had that church surrounded, if the enemy troops in the church don't run, there's nothing you can do except stand there and keep shooting at them. You can't. There's no way to storm a fort in this game. You can't, charge it and initiate a melee and drive the enemy out of there. You really just have to stand there shooting at them while they're in a defensive position, and you're not, by the way. Um, and just wait for them to break and run. And the game works on a system of morale checks. And, it is possible for units to just pass them all and not run. And while I did drive the Prussians out of the church and I did capture it in the first playthrough, it just took too long. They just wouldn't run fast enough. Um, and, I only mention this because in scenarios like this, sometimes that's just going to happen. Um, because there's no way to force the issue, because there's no way to storm a fortified position like that and actually physically drive the enemy out. You're really relying on the enemy just breaking and running and vacating the fort so that you can occupy it and start getting fort points from it. And it is possible to make all the right moves and just still not to be able to drive them out of there in time. To actually accrue enough points. And it's one of the things I don't necessarily like about this game. I do wish there was a way to actually, sort of force the issue. And, if you can bring overwhelming manpower to bear, 6-1 odds, 7-1 odds of your troops versus what's inside the fort, I think you should be able to make an attempt at storming the fort, even if there's some sort of melee penalty for doing it. There should be some option to at least try to force the issue, because if the enemy troops are inside the church and they just keep passing their morale checks, there's really nothing you can do but stand there and keep shooting at them. Um, So I didn't quite make it the first time. I was close. You know, like I said, I was in like 1990, and I in the for the video series, I want to show you guys, how to achieve a major victory in every single scenario. Um, so I debated putting it up anyway, just to show you how sometimes, in these storm the fort scenarios, you're gonna have a run of bad luck and not be able to do it. But I decided to just replay the scenario and see if I could get dealt a better hand, so to speak, because every time you play a scenario, it's different. And in this playthrough that I actually recorded, I got the completely opposite result. I moved up to the fort, and the uh, the Prussians inside the fort vacated it almost before I could finish surrounding it. They got out of there very fast, and that's part of the randomness of it, and to some degree, it's part of the replayability of the game. If every single time you played this a scenario, you got the exact same result as long as you did the exact same thing, um, there wouldn't be much replayability to the game, and I probably would have stopped playing it a long time ago. But I keep going back to these scenarios and replaying them, um, because I'm always going to get different results, and I may discover different things and so forth. So yeah, in this playthrough, I did basically exactly what I did in the first playthrough. It just they left the fort earlier, and that's just the way it is when it comes to these shoot up the fort scenarios. Is sometimes they're going to run and sometimes they aren't. So let's get the video started here. And like I said, we need 2,000 points for a major victory. The objective is worth 100 points per minute. So like I said, bare minimum, you got to get in there with 10 minutes to spare at least. Preferably 11, because you never know if you're going to be right on the minute. 11 or 12 minutes, you really want to get into that fort by to just barely make enough points to do it. Alrighty. So you are ordered to attack the village of Plancenoit with your division. The 4th Battery of the Guard Reserve Artillery is attached to your division. Drive the Prussians out of the village and hold it against any counterattacks. Okay, so what we're going to do, we have 2 brigades, and we got to get them moving right away. So we're going to take our 1st brigade and move up the right side of the town here into this open field. And we're going to just click the formation button, and we're just going to move them up in column by division. It's a good, relatively compact way to advance a brigade. And if you need to charge, you're already in shape for it. And we're going to move on the opposite side of the town into the open field, kind of in front of the church. I just want to make it clear, you never want to kind of move down the street. Some of these buildings are very close together, and there are certain what I call glitch spots in this village, where if you're trying to like move between houses and stuff, your units can get stuck, and once they get stuck, you can't get them out of there. And I'll actually show you, I actually do that purposely later on just to show you how it works. Now, initially as I'm moving this unit, I kind of forget to deploy some skirmishers here, because we need to shoot up this little group of Prussians standing in the middle of the road there, and we need to get them out of there. So I deploy one group of skirmishers here just to kind of get in front of them and shoot them up. And we're going to move the rest of the brigade into the open field in front of the church. And both my divisions are going to outflank this main unit right here in the middle of the woods. We're going to be on this side, and we're going to be on this side. So they're not going to stay there long. They're in a forward position, and they're about to get outflanked on both sides. And I'm going to start moving some of these artillery batteries up where their fire is a little closer, and they can do, be a little more effective. Now, I don't really have much time in this scenario to actually go and really bring my artillery to bear in a kind of right-in-your-face canister way that you've seen me done in some previous scenarios, because it's really important for the infantry to get a move on and try and take this village as quickly as possible. So our infantry is advancing, and on both sides here. Now, as you can see, one of my battalions here is actually going to run through, just because of where I set them up. They're the most direct route. They're just going to go right through, and they're actually going to run between these skirmishes and these skirmishes. So I'm going to double quick them just so they get through very quickly. This is a small Prussian unit. I'm not worried about them doing any kind of real damage to them. I'm more worried about obscuring my skirmishers' line of sight. So I just want to rush these guys kind of through, you know, before they are blocking the skirmishers' line of sight for a very long time. And now we'll start bringing some of the guns up. I'm not really sure at this point what I'm going to do with them. I'm just moving them forward so that I, you know, if I decide I need them, they're a lot closer than they are here. But, you know, there's no real plan for like an artillery bombardment or something. You know, we don't have time. It's a short scenario. It's as long as a typical brigade scenario. It's only 30 minutes long. And you really got to get these Prussians out of the church. And I'm really pretty much moving directly against the church kind of as fast as I can. You know, because I want to give myself, you know, if, you know, I didn't know how long it was going to take me to drive them out of there. And after the first playthrough where it didn't happen fast enough, I was certainly trying to move as quickly as possible here because I didn't want to have to do a third playthrough. And like I said, you know, with these shoot up the fort scenarios, that's just something that can sometimes happen. Not being able to force the issue means that you can make all the right moves and, you know, they're still not going to run out of the church. And that just sometimes happens. If that happens, hey, just replay it, you know, and you might get a different result in terms of, you know, getting them out of there faster, which is exactly what I did here. I made the exact same preliminary moves here that I made in the first playthrough. I just had better luck as far as the Prussians withdrawing out of the fort. So I'm taking units and I'm immediately going to start trying to place them around the outer perimeter of the fort here so I can immediately start bringing fire on them. We're already 5 minutes into the scenario. Now, I'm not double quicking my troops because there will be some instances where some charges have to happen, and you know, as I've mentioned, double quicking does sap your unit's fatigue, which can affect how well they charge. So even though I need to get a move on, I'm still not double quicking them in case I need to make some charges. So I'm moving 3 battalions towards the church. I left 1 battalion behind to deal with that Prussian unit that's in the road there, and as you can see, they're, you know, outflanked on either side. You know, they're getting ready to run. All right, so now we're going to advance this brigade to pin these troops on this side of the creek here and kind of box them in between the buildings and the creek here and keep them from reinforcing this side of things. So we're going to deploy into battle line here, and I'm not necessarily trying to drive them off the field right this moment. I just want to kind of pin them up so that they can't come over to this area and start making things even harder for me. So we're just going to engage them, just to keep them engaged at the moment. We'll worry about, you know, maybe driving them from the field later on, but I have to get this set up first. You know, I have to start bringing fire against the church as soon as possible, and that's probably the key to this whole scenario, is to just bring fire against the church as quickly as you possibly can. Sometimes that'll be easier, sometimes that'll be harder, depending on how quickly the Prussians kind of give way. But on this side of things, just engage them. Set up in a battle line like this. You know, tweak your troops however you need to tweak them. There is some cavalry in the back, but as long as you don't push too far forward, they don't really cause you a problem. You know, we're just trying to keep these guys engaged right here. And as you can see, I'm setting up, I have these guys firing these guys. I'm going to move these guys into this side of the church, and there's another unit back here I'm going to kind of bring up right here. As you can already see, one battalion is moving out of the church right off the bat. So, this is the kind of, luck that it depends on. They just failed their morale check right off the bat, and off they ran. So there's still one battalion in there, and they hang on a little bit longer. But certainly it's a much more optimistic result than the first playthrough I tried to record, where, they stood there like superheroes. And I'm going to deploy some skirmishers just to put them kind of in here so that they can shoot at this unit. And as always, I let them start moving under AI control first before I take control of them, so that the toolbar flips to the skirmisher layout as I covered in episode 2. And I'm going to use a new maneuver we haven't used before, and it's called wheel back. Wheel back. Wheel right back, where I'm going to just kind of wheel the unit kind of back as opposed to pivoting on their center. The right stays where they were, and just the left side of the unit kind of moves backwards. So it's a way of adjusting facing without pivoting on your center, and instead pivoting on your flank. So as you can see, once we, before I even had a chance to really set it up the way I wanted to, as soon as I kind of set up this line on the left, they all ran out. So a much better result than I got the first playthrough, and I had barely shot at them. So, the morale checks in this game are somewhat random as far as how long it's going to take you to actually drive units out of a defended building like this. This building is one of the trickier buildings to actually get your units to move into. You really kind of have to click the right way to get them to move in there. As they can, if you don't click it right, they can be in the fort without actually occupying it. So you just kind of have to watch when you click it and see where your little green marker goes. If you see it outside the fort, you didn't click it right. You kind of, it's kind of a click like right on top of the roof. And you kind of have to have like the camera a certain way for it to work. It's kind of just practice. You'll get used to how to do it, but it's just something to be aware of, that when you click on the fort, just actually make sure that your units are going to move into it and actually occupy it. And you'll know they're occupying it because their flag will then display above the church. As you can see, I already moved the leader in there. There's his flag popped up, and we have control of the objective. So we got control of the objective very, very quickly, only 10 minutes into the scenario, which is completely different than the result I got in the first playthrough, where I did the exact same thing, as I did here, but they just stood there and took it. And I didn't get into the church till about 19 minutes, with like 19 minutes left in the scenario, and it just wasn't quite enough to get all the points you need. Like I said, I think it's 100 points a minute, and you will get between 800 and 1,000 points just from casualties alone that you inflict. Now here's an instance of they are not actually in the church, even though they're standing in it. You can see their flag is not, it's not displayed above the church. So I'm just clicking on the objective here to try and actually get these units to move into the fort. And you won't be able to see the men when you do it right. When you move into the church here, you'll see as soon as they move into position, the men will actually disappear, as they're considered to be garrisons of the church now. And I'm just making sure, yeah, you see they're actually disappearing. And they're considered to be in the fort now. And you can see all their units, their flags on top of the church. So that's what I kind of mean why you can actually move units into the church in this scenario and not have them actually be occupying it. And you want them to be occupying it because that's how you get the defensive bonus of being in the church and being in an all-around formation where you can shoot out all sides, as opposed to looking like you're in the church, but they were basically not considered to be in the church and they were still in line formation. and they weren't getting any defensive benefit from the church. All right, so we have the church, and now we're just going to try and drive these Prussians back a little bit so they're not able to shoot us out of there. Now, we're able to fire on them while we're in the church, but I'm also going to bring some units up and start shooting at them from outside the church. And I'm also going to bring my division commander and have him go into the church as well, because then he'll start getting the points from the objective as opposed to the brigade commander that's in there now. He'll start getting all the points, and they'll all kind of be accrued in one spot. I can just click on the division commander and see all the accumulated points for the entire division, including the infantry, including the artillery. So I'm going to start advancing this unit now, and so it can kind of shoot into the flank of these units that are shooting at the church. And I moved one unit out and formed square on the outer perimeter of the town there. That's just to keep the cavalry honest, just to keep them from trying to move forward and cause my other units some trouble. And I'm going to start advancing now on this side of the town, basically just to drive the Prussians further back. Not necessarily concerned with really like driving them from the field, but just pushing them back far enough that they're no longer really in range of the objective. They can't contest it. They can't possibly shoot my men out of the church. I'll start bringing the artillery up. But the real key to the scenario is getting the church. Once you get the church, if you get it quickly, you're going to get enough points for a major victory. And that's really the problem with the scenarios. It really hinges on you actually getting possession of the church. And sometimes with these shoot out the fort scenarios, that can be difficult. That can be a pain in the butt, because there's no way to force the issue. You just have to stand there shooting at them and bring as much firepower to bear. So okay, now this unit is deploying into line, and they're going to start shooting at these two units that are shooting at the church. There's two units there, but there's one unit shooting at the church, and the Prussians are starting to give way. All right, so we have 830 points so far, and we haven't really had the objective for any length of time. Most of those points are through just casualties that we've inflicted so far. So it's 100 points a minute, and I think we probably have about 200 or 300 points of that from the objective, and the rest is through the casualties we've inflicted. So you do need to inflict some casualties too, and that's not that hard to do. Just move forward and start shooting at these Prussian units. Now this is the same Prussian brigade we played in the last scenario. Now this isn't a carryover or a locked scenario, but you don't have to play the previous scenario to play this one. But this scenario does assume some previous losses. So the Prussian brigade that we played is no longer as big as it was when we played them in the previous scenario. So it's a much more even fight. If you recall, in the previous scenario, the Prussian lines were just huge. I mean, they were enormous, and the French we were fighting were relatively small. So we were able to bring superior firepower to bear. In this scenario, like I said, it calculates that the Prussian brigade has lost a certain amount of men, and the units are no longer as big as they were. Plus, the units we command are bigger than the units of the 19th Division of the 6th Corps that were occupying Plancenoit on the French side in the previous scenario. Our units, you see, they're pretty big themselves. So it's a much more even firefight. And So you just want to use your lines to bring more firepower to bear against the Prussians than they can against you. So they've been pushed back pretty well now. They're no longer in front of the church. And I'm just going to, wherever they move, I'm kind of going to, whatever units I have outside the church, I'm going to move to. And, just kind of keep up fire against them. The good thing is once you push the Prussians out of the church, or out of the town, they don't really make an attempt to retake it. They sort of just kind of back up. And you can keep following them and pushing them further if you want, but they don't really make much of an attempt to come and take the church back from you once you kind of push them away from it. So it turned out to be a good move to put this square on the outside of the town here, because the Prussian cavalry is actually trying to advance on my right flank here. Fortunately, we have the square there, and we have a whole bunch of artillery. I'm kind of relying on the square to, shoot them up as they kind of approach. There is also a whole bunch of French cavalry back there, and if the Prussians move close enough, they will move into action, which did happen in the previous playthrough I tried to record. The French cavalry did get involved and drove those Prussian cavalry units off. Here they don't, because in the original playthrough I didn't have the square. I had all my units in the town. I didn't have a square out there, which is why I put them out there here in case this time, in case that happened again. The French cavalry got involved and drove them off. But in this instance, because I put the square there, the Prussian cavalry really never gets close enough to activate the French cavalry and get them into action. So nothing really developed there this time around. So really the only difference between this playthrough and the previous playthrough that I tried to originally record it, is just that this time I was able, the Prussians ran out of the fort a lot earlier than they did in the previous playthrough. But my approach was exactly the same. The units, the way I set the units up around the church was exactly the same. Everything I did was exactly the same in this playthrough as it was in the previous playthrough, except the Prussians just ran out of the church faster. And there's really no way to anticipate how long or how quickly you're going to be able to achieve that result. Which is why sometimes you just have to, play the scenario again and hope you get a better die roll, so to speak, as far as the Prussians withdrawing out of the church. Because the same thing happened. I drove all the Prussians out of the town, just like I did here, except for the 2 battalions that were in the fort. They just stood there like Supermen, and they wouldn't run. And without that objective, even if you get a result like this, where I'm just driving the Prussians right out of the town, if you can't capture the objectives, there's no way to achieve enough points to get a major victory. So, like I said, that's one of my small quips with the game, is when it comes to the shoot out the fort scenarios. There's a certain amount of luck involved in terms of just how fast they're going to break and run, because there's no way to force the issue. You just have to stand there and shoot at them until they decide to break and run. Now, if you remember early on in this video, I talked about how it's possible to get units stuck. And here I did it on purpose. These guys right here are now stuck between the kind of fence of the cemetery and this town, and this little house right here, trying to move. There's no way to move them. They're frozen, basically. And I did this on purpose to show you guys how this could happen, so that you avoid trying to move in tight spaces with big battalions, because they can get stuck, and once they do, there's no way to get them out. So from now until the end of the scenario, that unit is going to basically be walking in place. You can see I have them on halt, basically trying to get them to stop, and they won't. Basically, they're they're out of play. Nothing you do is going to have any effect on them. They're just going to stand there walking in place. And that's just kind of a glitch that results from trying to cram a big unit through a small space. And that, it tends to happen in towns. I notice it happens in Plancenoit more than any other town. I've really never had it happen in Ligny, or Saint Armand. Even though there are tight spaces in those towns as well, it just doesn't seem to be as prone to happening as it does in Plancenoit. So yeah, I tried to move these guys through this small spot there, this small space here, basically trying to see if I could initiate a freeze as far as the unit being stuck in place. And I did. They're stuck there. They will not be able to move for the rest of the scenario. They're just kind of walking in place. Luckily, I don't have them on double click, so it's not really going to affect their fatigue or anything. And I waited until I had firm control of the church to actually initiate that. But I did want to try and get that to happen, so you guys could see. Yeah, try to make sure you don't try and cram really big battalions through tight places, or this can happen. They'll get stuck, and you have no control over them. They're out of the battle. I'm showing you, I'm trying to move them forward, trying to move them backward, and just nothing's happening. They're stuck. They can't move. And they'll just go like that kind of till the end of time. It's glitched out, so to speak. It's kind of a bug in I guess the pathing of big units trying to squeeze through a small space like that. So I wanted to show you that to bring that to your attention, so that you don't try to move big units through small places, get them stuck. And then, it can happen in here too. If you try to move between these two houses or through here, that can happen. That was one of the reasons why when I needed to fight units on the street in between the houses, I was using skirmishers. It doesn't happen with skirmishers. They're smaller units. So yeah. It's also why I took one brigade and approached on the right side in the open field, and the other brigade I took and approached on the left side in the open field, so that there was no chance of any of my units getting stuck in between the houses, so to speak. And I'm bringing my artillery. There's a whole lot of Prussians out there just standing there, and I'm bringing my artillery forward just to see if I can, extract some points from them. See if I can shoot at them and get any kind of reaction from them. And this is the rest of the Prussian corps there. And we'll actually, when we come to corps scenarios, we'll cover this whole situation again, only fighting it as the entire corps, as opposed to on a division scale. So there's a lot of scenarios that take place in this Plancenoit area here. So as you can see, I've provoked a little reaction. A unit is moving forward, and I'm going to move some skirmishers in front of the artillery, so as always, to screen the artillery from getting shot at by these guys. But these guys have already been in battle and pushed back, so I'm not expecting them to really be much of a threat. And as soon as this artillery gets going, we're going to be able to kind of bomb away on them. But they don't even really get close enough. I move the skirmishers, and the skirmishers start shooting at them, and they decide to pull back. It wasn't really a serious advance. And as I mentioned in previous episodes, skirmishers do not block artillery's line of sight, or infantry's line of sight for that matter. So there's no issue with putting skirmishers right in front of your artillery, because they will not stop the artillery from shooting at whatever it wants to shoot at. But it does help the artillery not get their artillerymen shot, because the unit in front who's ever shooting is shooting at the skirmishers, not the artillery. Well, there's my boys doing their jog in place, and that they will do, for the next 4 minutes of the scenario. And like I said, there's no way to get them out of there. They're just glitched, which is why I waited until I had firm control over this area and I had the artillery up and I got units out in front to actually go and show you that. So I knew I could afford to just lose this unit from play to show you guys that glitch. Yeah, changing formation won't do anything. I'm just kind of going through the motions. Taking them off to take charge won't do anything. They are stuck. And I'm doing all this just to show you guys, that nothing you do will have any effect on a glitch unit once it's stuck like this. They're just going to be stuck in place, and there's nothing you can do about it. So we've got 2,200 points. We're 200 points over what you need for a major victory. So as you see, we have 3 minutes left in the scenario, and I captured the church pretty early on. And still, we've only just cleared the amount of points you need for a major victory. So that's what makes this scenario difficult. It's difficult for a silly reason. It's not difficult because you're not capable of pushing the Prussians out of the church. Out of the town. I did this the first playthrough. It looked very similar to this. It's difficult because there's no way to force the issue as far as enemy units occupying the church, which is the objective. Where you're going to get any points, and that's ultimately what makes it a difficult scenario. Is it's just a crapshoot whether they're going to run away or not. You can do the exact same thing and get wildly different results depending on how the units inside the church hold up. The first playthrough I did, it really looked a lot like this, except I was still surrounding the church, and I had troops here, I had troops here, I had troops here, kind of in a semicircle all around the church here, and I just couldn't shoot them out. I had control of this whole area just like I do here. It was perfectly safe for all my units to be in a semicircle around the church, and I just couldn't get them out of there. And I did eventually, but it was like 10 minutes later than I did in this playthrough. And it just wasn't enough time to actually cross the finish line. It was close, like I said, I was within 10 points or something of a major victory. Maybe I had, if I had taken a few less casualties or something, it would have been enough. But ultimately, it was just I felt it took too long. It took too long to drive them out of there and actually occupy the church. Because even after you drive them out of there, it takes a few minutes to get your units in to the church. Because if they have to walk through this side or this side, they have to walk through the fence and the cemetery, and that slows down their movement. You have to get the officer in there. All that takes a couple of minutes before you can even start. Before you even are considered to be occupying the objective. And then you have to wait a minimum of 1 minute before you're even starting to accrue points from the objective. So, and in a 30-minute scenario like this, it's like every second counts, I think the scenario should have been 35, 40 minutes. It should have been, I think it would be more consistently beatable if you were able to, had a few extra minutes there to account for, the Prussians maybe, being a little tougher as far as staying inside the church. But yeah, that's basically it. Just advance up the right side of the field, the right side of the town with one brigade, advance up the other side of the town in the open field with the other brigade. Bring as much firepower against the church as quickly as you can in to try to make the Prussians run out of there. On the right side of the town, you don't necessarily need to focus on trying to drive the Prussians out of that area right away. Really, what your brigade on the right is doing is just engaging them, just to keep them from making life harder on the church side of the town for you. You just want to keep those units pinned up. And in fact, I advise against trying to charge them and break them and drive them out of the town, because if you're doing that, you're spending time away from trying to set up your perimeter around the church, and that is the priority: is bringing as much fire against the church from as many different sides as you can, as quickly as you can. Um, so the right side of the town, just move your brigade up, deploy them in line, and just have them engage the Prussians in that area to keep them from making things more difficult on the church side of the town. And basically, it's just it's a crapshoot at that point. Whether the Prussians are going to run out of the church with enough time for you to occupy it and get enough points. You know, that's the luck part of the scenario. If it doesn't happen for you, just play it again. There's nothing wrong with the approach. You can follow exactly what I did here. Um, and you'll be able to bring fire against the church, like I said, within 5 minutes, 10 minutes of the opening of the scenario. You'll be there, and you'll be either setting up your perimeter or already have it setting up, and be able to start bringing fire against the church as quickly as possible. um, and that's basically the best way to tackle the scenario. Um, Unlike other scenarios, I can't guarantee it's going to work every single time, because so much of it is just a matter of luck. But the approach is solid. You're spending minimal time on the right side of the town. Um, you're just going to set up that brigade in line and just to engage the Prussian units and keep them busy. But you don't really want to do any more than that. And kind of focus on what's going on with that brigade, because if you do that, you're taking time away from setting up your perimeter around the church with your brigade on the left, and that is the priority. So you want to keep things really simple on the right side so that you can focus on getting that perimeter set up around the church and trying to bring as much fire against the church as you possibly can. Um, and then, yeah, like I said, the rest is, whether the dealer is going to deal you blackjack or not. It's pretty much luck. If the Prussians are going to vacate the church, if they vacate the church relatively quickly, just as soon as you just keep an eye on it. Watch those Prussian flags on top of the church. That's your indicator. If you see the flag disappear, you'll start to see the Prussian troops kind of running out of the church. Immediately start to move your units into the church. And as I said, when you click on top of that church, you know, look around. Don't just blindly click on the church and assume that your units are going to move into it. Look around and make sure that that green arrow that is your unit destination indicator is actually not somewhere else. And you don't, it's actually, you don't see it. So it's inside the church. And even when your unit moves into the church, make sure you see their flag pop up on the top of the church, on the roof, to indicate that they're actually occupying it. Because as you saw in this video, it's possible to actually be in the church and not be considered to be occupying the church. There are just, I don't know, there are some weird graphical bugs with Plancenoit, with that area, in terms of, it being just much more likely to get units stuck in tight places, in terms of um, trying to occupy the church, being in the church but not occupying it. These are things that I don't see in any other part of the battlefield or any of the expansions. I never have problems occupying the little castles around Ligny or in Saint Armand or Gemion Court in Quatre Bras or any other of these, or Papillote or Hougoumont or any of these other fortifications that are all over the place in this series. Plancenoit Church is the only one that is kind of glitchy. So really pay attention when you move your troops into that church and make sure you see their flag, and the leader too. Make sure you see their flags pop up on top of the roof. And at that point, that's how you know they're actually inside the church, occupying the church, and in an all-around formation uh, inside the church properly. Um, and if you don't see the flag pop up, but you know the unit is in the church, then that means what happened to me in this playthrough happened to you, which is, they're in there, but they're not occupying it. And you basically just kind of have to zoom into the church and kind of click on the unit and then manually click on the objective and, you know, get them to move towards it. And when you see the troops in there start to disappear, that's how you know your troops are now going to occupy the church. So, yeah, there are some glitchy things in Plancenoit that you need to look out for. But hopefully, I think I covered them all the important ones that you need to look out for. And this was the second part of our trilogy. In the third part of the final divisional uh, attack on Plancenoit, we will once again be playing the Prussians. And we're going to have to capture Plancenoit again after having been driven out of it by the young guard here. So, and at that point, we'll be facing elements of the young guard, the middle guard, and even the old guard. And again, we're gonna have to fight over this church, yet again. So that'll be next, and that scenario is called Meet the Old Guard. So that's it for now, guys, and I'll see you next time.